Hey, Jen.
Hey, Em. I like that we're starting the episode now by just saying hi to each other.
Because every time somebody write in and tell us a better intro.
Someone. I mean, maybe we should sing at the beginning.
Okay, you start.
But then do you think people just would not listen anymore?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I would say that is completely accurate. What will happen next?
100%.
Great.
So we keep talking about like, okay, what's our next topic? Because Em and I are doing a ton of episodes with just the two of us.
Yes.
And one of the things we really wanted to talk about was like different parts of ourselves.
Yes.
And Em has a really interesting story that she has not told me yet. And I told her, just tell me on the podcast so we can talk about it.
Okay. So, we ended last week's episode talking about that I was going to this wedding, right? And like the different seasons of life and how because this will be a part 2. I was a little nervous about being around my friends. They're a very different season of life for me, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. That part turned out pretty well, actually. We went to Michigan. We went to the wedding.
The pictures made it look so fun.
Yes. No. Also, Michigan's fucking awesome.
When you called me and said how beautiful Michigan was.
Michigan is gorgeous. First of all.
Underrated.
Because we live in Satan's asshole, the humidity pit in the Northeast.
It's so bad.
It's so humid.
My hair
yes, I know, it's
is
huge.
doing
it's
things
huge.
that I never thought it could do.
So we get off the plane. Absolutely beautiful, lovely. Michigan was we got into Traverse City, which was, did you see the news the past week where there was that carnival ride that almost tipped over and all of the bystanders went and put their body weight on it?
No, thank God I didn't see that.
Okay, well, that's where we were. It was right by the Cherry Festival, like literally when that happened is where we were. Okay, so we were in Traverse City.
Oh my God.
The cherry capital, cherries everywhere, delicious cherries, really lovely.
Is that
beautiful,
where
beautiful
you
Michigan.
got those cherries from today?
No, it's not. I got this
Okay.
Those are from Whole Foods
Same.
in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. No, not, but thank you for making that connection.
You're welcome.
So Michigan's awesome. Also, weed's legal, so that's exciting for everyone. So we had this really great time. But 2 very interesting things happened, which I thought were important to talk about, because I think it's one of those things where usually this would happen to someone and they would try to pretend like it never happened. And so instead, I'm going to talk about it. And so here's the first one. The first one was, this was all of my friends from college, and my daughter was there. She was the flower girl.
And she looked adorable.
Adorable, but she was very bad. She was a really bad flower girl.
I think it's a hard job.
We will probably not be adding that one to her.
No one will ever ask her to be on her resume.
She's also, it's just like, it's too many people and they're all looking. It's like, whatever. It's a very complex situation.
How funny would it be if someone put that on their resume just as an adult?
If somebody applied to work for us and that was on the resume,
they're hired immediately.
In 1 second.
Not even a question.
Yeah, hilarious. Okay, so we're at the wedding, and my husband, beforehand, we had already talked about my husband was going to take her home, like, once it got, like, too late, right? When she started to fall apart. It's all of my friends, so we had talked about, no problem. But it was interesting. I kept getting a bunch of, like, little comments from only the men there about how much Aaron was doing. And which is fine. My husband does way more, I think, than a lot of fathers. And we definitely really do 50-50 split in parenting. Mm-hmm. And so he had her for the weekend because it was my friends. So I kept getting his comments, but I was like, whatever, patriarchy,
like, what
blah, blah,
were
blah.
the comments?
Oh my gosh. So Aaron doesn't get to have fun at all. So Aaron just has to, so wow. So 2 nights in a row, Aaron's going to go home. Now, keep in mind.
Know that no one would have ever said that to you.
Never. No one would ever have said that to Aaron about me.
Yeah.
Also, my husband's a complete introvert. He has no interest in being.
He's thrilled. It's thrilled to do.
He's happy to take Millie home and then watch TV.
It's like a great excuse.
Yes, exactly. So we talk in our marriage. We have this. But, okay, at the end of the night, I end up having a great time. At the end of the night, before we get on the buses, the shuttle back to the hotel, I go up to the bartender to get a glass of water to bring on the bus in case I feel kind of nauseous. I thought I was being responsible. The bartender, I say, hey, can I have a glass of water? And she says, aren't you the one with a toddler? Aren't you the one who has a 2-year-old? And I'm like, oh yeah. And at first I'm like thinking she's gonna be like, she was so cute or something. She's like, wow, you're really drinking a lot for a mom. You're really gonna regret this tomorrow.
No.
Okay. No one would ever say that to my husband.
Hold on.
Yep.
You're kidding me.
I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding you at all. Right? As if because I'm a mother, I cannot let loose and have fun and enjoy myself. And I think this is one of the things. And the reason we want to talk about parts today is because like there is a lot of loss within growth, right? If I'm a professional person, I can't be silly. If I'm a mother, I can't get drunk, right? Like any of these things, like there is a lot of loss as we get older, right? About like, you know, we'll let our kids be covered in ice cream and play with bubbles. But like if adults do that, like they're insane.
It's a lot of like societal pressure around, okay, once you become a mother, you have to be this one specific thing.
Yes,
and exactly. If you step outside that box, I am going to shame you. First of all, I'm so sorry you had that experience.
So, okay, well, so this is what it goes to, is that I didn't give a fuck because this is a part of myself I feel very healed in. This is a part of myself that I do a lot of work in. It's easy for me to call bullshit. I think like I literally just like laughed and was like, oh, okay, and walked away with my glass of water, right? So I didn't think anything of it. Now that comment could have made someone else spiral. And maybe could have made me spiral a year and a half ago.
100%. Well, someone who's struggling with that, right? Like someone who guilt or is feeling insecure and is also trying to integrate those different parts of themselves and also taking on all of that societal pressure. My first thought was, where was that coming from for the bartender?
I think for the bartender, she just wanted everyone to get the fuck out of her bar.
Right. Do you think that's the way to do it?
No, I do not. I think that she was exhausted and she was annoyed at the other people. And I think I just happened to be the person that got it taken out.
Oh, see, I took that to a whole other level in my mind.
Own stuff? I don't know.
Like her own stuff, or she had like a mother or parent who partied, or possibly there was some sort of like, because it's just such a strong,
oh my god,
specific reaction.
It was so, the tone of it was so judgmental. Like the tone of it, which is so interesting, right? That like another thing to think about is like, why are we in this society allowed to make comments on people we know fucking nothing about?
I mean, and it's just getting more and more. There's so much more space for it.
Yeah.
And it really blows my mind when, like, I'm still very shocked.
Yeah. That's not,
I know.
And this is the comment. This
is not even the end of it.
But, so for me, here's the thing. I think it is, mom shaming is so normal, and woman shaming in general is so fucking normal. Everyone has an opinion on everything, right? And so for some reason, because you exist within this world and you happen to get born, people feel like that gives them the ability to chat about you.
And it's almost like there's this idea of when you become a mother, you have to completely lose yourself.
Yes.
Right? And also like the contrast between the comments that were being made about Aaron.
Yeah.
And then that comment towards you.
Yes.
Like, just, it's such...
Poor Aaron.
Poor Aaron. He doesn't get to enjoy himself, right? And you are enjoying yourself. And your child is completely taken care of.
She was
had a great time.
She was fast asleep in her doggy blow-up bed.
And that was your time.
Yes.
You have spent, and we talked about this on the last episode, you spent so much time planning around, okay, what am I going to do with her? What's this going to look like? You know, and we'll talk about when she gets to that point where she needs to go home, Aaron, you'll take her home. Like, you planned all of that shit out, and you get this space to let loose.
Yeah.
And someone says that. I'm mind blown.
And so, right, okay, so here's the thing. I think that, like I said, like that's a part of me that I feel very integrated with. Like I have done so much work on the different parts of myself coming together within motherhood, because I think people can have an opinion on me from the other, but people also have so many opinions on child-free people about what they should be able to do. Like, you should always be accessible. You don't have kids. You should always be the one willing to travel. You should always be the one willing to adjust.
Or you have so much more money to like do things.
Exactly. Yes. Right? So I feel like the same thing, you shouldn't be allowed to do anything, mom. We say to child-free moms, well, you should be completely accessible.
Yeah, like what are you complaining about?
Yes, you should be totally available.
Absolutely. What are you complaining about? Like, you have so much free time.
Yes.
And right, there's a huge contrast there.
Yes, absolutely. But either one is I get to police and have a thought about who you should be.
I get to put you in a box, and if you step outside of that box, I get to make a comment about it because it makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that's really what it is, right?
Yes.
Like it's something about them. It's making them uncomfortable that you're stepping outside of the box that they have put you in.
I had sent you that meme like last week that was like, what is it about my liberation that makes you so uncomfortable? Right? And the same thing, like we've had people say like, oh, we curse too much on the podcast and we talk too much on the podcast. And so it's like, what about that makes you so uncomfortable? Because that's what it is. When people have that reaction, it's like discomfort spewing out of their mouths. Like venom.
I had a lot of conflict internally about obviously starting the podcast, as we've talked about a million times. But the professional parts of ourselves that we have to put on, and also being a human being. And my mom was always like, you cannot get piercings, you can't get tattoos, you have to be a specific way, you can't curse. I grew up with that idea.
Yeah. And a direct rule.
Here's
who you have to be to be successful.
You won't get hired. Like, you have to be this very specific person.
Yeah. And also, we should say for the record, this is being said to us as white women. I cannot even imagine what it is like to be a black woman.
Oh my God.
A black non-binary person, and the ridiculous professional bullshit standards that's put on them.
100%. And so to really look at that and say, like, where have these messages come from? And because those conflicts build internally, and I've really had to battle with them as we started the podcast and started to talk about things like smoking weed. Yeah. Right? Like the one thing we did on Burnout when you like talked about us smoking. Oh my God. You hated it. I wanted to die.
Great episode. Great. Season 1.
Great episode. Oh, but it speaks to the fact, and now I don't care. I feel like I've healed that part of myself. I will go and like hang out with my parents' friends, and talk about anything I want.
Well, and don't you feel it's also one of the things that has allowed us to heal those parts is that we have gotten positive feedback as well.
Yes, because I think that in us feeling more liberated within ourselves, it's helping others to feel more liberated within themselves, I would hope. But I think that that's so important because it's so much more freeing to be able to just be like, I can be professional and I can also be myself. Yeah. And I feel that as a therapist too, right? Like absolutely. That, and integrating those two, I think is really helpful in our work in general and in our podcast. Yep. So take us in to the next
So that part, I was able to sort of walk away and be like, what a fucking asshole, and like, whatever, walk away, right? Now, there's this whole other part we've talked about a lot, which is that I've been for a very long time now in recovery of an eating disorder. And there is a big part that even though I've done so much work and I feel incredibly healed there is still the initial automatic response, right? Like, remember we talked about ants and cats, right? We have this automatic native response, and I'm able really, really good to come on in with that cat, to pounce the shit on it.
What was your automatic negative response?
So at the end of the wedding, they had pizza for everyone. Which was great. I fucking love pizza.
Pizza's the best.
Right, pizza's the best, especially when you're drunk, because it doesn't matter how bad it is.
The greatest.
Right, so I'm sitting there eating pizza with everyone else, and there is a thought coming over me that, like, I shouldn't be eating this. Right now, at this point, I'm pretty good at being like, that's fucking diet culture bullshit, that's fat phobia, that's blah, 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 blah. Okay. Now we get onto the buses. So there's like shuttles leaving.
You're like having the time of your life.
Well, at this point, I'm like, I'd like to go.
It's time to go. Chugging water.
But, I'm like chugging water. I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm ready. I'm out. But so we go to get on these buses, and there was like multiple different buses. I get on one with my girlfriend Liz, who I talked about.
Love her.
And who, for the record, spent the entire weekend with us, with Millie.
Did you tell her that we talked about her on the podcast?
I was just like, we talked about you, but I didn't tell her, and like, I don't think she actually listens.
Oh, good.
So, like, we'll find out very soon. I know her sister does. Hi, Amanda. So Amanda will fucking, call this shit out. Okay, so like, Liz and I get on this bus, and Liz was like, I don't see any of our friends here. I don't see my husband. I don't see anyone. So I was like, oh.
Were you like on like a
yes, like I think we were like got on the wrong bus, because there was like multiple hotels, because obviously we're staying in the cheapest one because we're cheap. And so Liz is like, I'm going to go check the other buses, stay here. I'm like, sounds good. Because I'm drunk at this point. I have my water. I'm sitting in my little nook. And Liz comes up, knocks on the window. She's like, you're on the wrong bus. And I was like, got it. All right. So I go to get off this bus and it's pretty full. And there's a girl come out at the same time. This girl that I was like hanging out with throughout the night, partying, whatever. She's hilarious. She's drunk. She's hugging somebody in a seat and like kind of partying in the aisles. And I was like, oh, excuse me. She wasn't moving. So I just moved past her. The bus driver in front of everyone says, you know, sweetie, you're really not built to be walking past people on the bus. So what do you think in that moment he's saying to me?
Oh my God.
In front of the entire bus, right? Now, I have done a lot of work on body neutrality, of moving past an eating disorder, of being okay with the weight that I am. And there is this part, though, that when it is brought up, it feels so exposing, right? This random fucking dude doesn't know me, doesn't know anything about it. I didn't hurt anyone moving past an aisle, you know what I mean? But one, there was this other part that was like, wow, like you immediately go to like, Jesus, what do you think like mega fat people experience?
Oh my God.
Which is the category, right? Yeah. Like, and so my initial response, because I was already having this thing of like I shouldn't eat, was like I got on the other bus and I'm like totally fucking spiraling out.
Yeah,
right?
What happened?
So I get on the other bus. I'm saying nothing. I'm totally spiraling out. All I can do is like be like, I'm like hyper aware of how my body feels. I'm like hyper fucking aware of like how I feel like I look in that dress. I'm sitting there like going to all these thoughts. And I say to myself, okay, I just need to get back to this hotel room. And as soon as I get back, I'm going to like talk to my partner about this. Yeah. Now, I think a lot of people feel embarrassed to talk to their partners about something like this because it feels like I don't want anyone
feels like shaming.
Yes,
there's
I don't
a lot
want
of
anyone
shame
to know that this happened. I don't want anyone to know that I was called fat, right? Because for a lot of us, especially people that have been yo-yo dieters and hit puberty first and are living larger bodies, the idea of being called fat is like the worst thing. Like, call me a fucking cunt bitch. Right. That's okay, but don't call me fat. Right. Which is fucked, right?
Right.
Like, when you really think about that, like, oh, Jesus.
When
like,
there's so much emphasis and when it dictates so much of your mental health, then that becomes the highest insult.
And so what it left me thinking about, though, was, okay, here's a part of myself that still needs more healing. The other one was so easy for me to be like, that was your shit, lady. Like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes.
And this one, I went internal, right?
And when you go internal,
I'm in.
You are.
It's a deep dive, baby.
It's a deep
high dive. We're going
dive.
Yep.
I rarely see Emmalee go internal. Recently, I did. Right? But when you're going internal, I'm like, oh, shit is bad.
Yeah.
Like, you are struggling.
Yes, yeah. And so it's this thing, right? Like, anyone who has crawled from the depths of hell of their eating disorder and doesn't live in a super thin body can understand this sentiment that, like, you try so hard to live within the world. And then at the end of the day, the world is sometimes going to hate you. It's going to sometimes hate you for being a woman or for being fat or for many people being black or a person of color, right? Like, it's so crazy that you can sit here and be like, oh, like, I truly live my life in a very, very specific way of being kind to people and being authentic and being transparent and really working hard at communication. And all of that can be dismissed because of how I look in a dress.
I also think it in a lot of ways speaks to the fact that, like, you have cultivated so much around yourself to be, like, you know, focused on body neutrality and working on your thoughts, and you can take control of what the information you take in, right? And like the people around you. But when you go out into the world, right, and you don't have control over,
you can't do anything.
You can't do anything about it.
Weight bias is still completely there.
So what did you do?
And you know what's funny? I was also thinking about, like, this podcast episode is, like, the pictures that we have up on the podcast, like the podcast art. I'm in a smaller body there, and you can't really see my body. And I'm like, oh, I wonder if people listen to this and think, like, oh, that girl's, like, very small. And it's like, oh, so, like, there's a part of me that I can also, like, pass, right, you would call it, right? Like, I could still fit into, like, extra large or free people. Like, there's, like, you know what I mean? Like, I, in some ways, have, like, a ton of privilege in, like, the ways I'm able to live within my body, with which other people do not. Yes. And I also have money to buy things that have, like, that are more expensive for extended sizing. Yeah. Like, I have a ton of privilege in that way. And it's so wild that this random guy in that moment made this comment.
What did you... I want to know.
What'd I do?
What'd you do?
Nothing. I walked off the bus. My therapist said the same thing. She's like, what'd you do? I said, nothing. Straightforward. I did, which is so funny, right? Because some people, like, knowing me, would be like, oh, Emily didn't, like, say a comment back.
Yeah,
But, like, my therapist, when I was processing with her yesterday, was like, yeah, but, like, that's, like, a trauma. Like, it might not be a macro trauma, but it's a micro, little t trauma of this idea of, like, you froze.
Yes. And... once again, when you freeze,
it's so noticeable.
It's also it also has to be bad. You know, it has to be hitting something for you.
Yeah.
Right? Because like if it's hitting on other things, like your typical response is like anger, right? Yes. Like you're going to more like fight mode.
Yeah.
But if it goes into freeze, like it's hitting something for you.
Right? And so it was just something I wanted to talk about, because I think that this type of thing happens so much more than we realize, but we don't talk about it enough. And I think the way people talk about it a lot right now is like when people tell you to smile, right? Like, you ever had a guy tell you on the street? It's happened to me so many times.
I mean, right? Honestly, I smile constantly.
I feel like in Philadelphia,
people have told me to stop smiling.
Really?
I don't know why. Yeah, remember? You were there. I think someone said Jen stopped smiling when we were on like a live.
Okay, so but I feel like in walking around Philly, many times I've been told to smile.
That I don't understand that.
I know.
Why is it? What is it about you not smiling?
Because as women, we are supposed to be pleasant and easygoing and small.
We are made for other people, right? Exactly. Like, we are made for you, to make you comfortable. I'm made to be a mom,
and I'm made to be in a tiny body, and I'm made to be all of this to please my husband. Not my husband's supposed to go home and take the child giving, and I'm supposed to go have fun, right? I am
here to be there for someone else.
Exactly.
And I think that, you know, the smile thing has not happened to me just because I'm constantly smiling. Not smiling when like something bad is happening, obviously. But I think I have such an internal thing about being quiet and not speaking up too much. Like, there was a lot of that, muting myself in a lot of ways, like leaving room for men to speak. And so it's really interesting, just this experience that you had where, and the bus driver was a man. Saying to you.
An older man,
Yeah.
Right? And like, it's just all I keep thinking about is like, right, so of course, anytime you have an interaction like this, you always afterwards think like, what would I have said? Like, in that, right? Like,
I was wondering if you were having that experience.
We always go to that. Yes. You know, you're in the shower and you have like conversations.
And you're lathering up. So pissed.
And you have like a full conversation or like what you would have said, right?
That's the worst. And you never get the chance to say it again.
And the thing is, I still cannot figure out what I would say. Because... one, I was intoxicated. I don't ever do conflict when I'm intoxicated. That's one thing that I am very good about. Well, also, I never really get intoxicated enough that I'm, like, out of control.
Right.
So I'm always aware enough to be like, this is not good.
Yes.
But I just don't think to that person who said that and did not give a shit who was said in front of and how it made me feel, what would I have said?
Excuse me, sir, that's inappropriate.
Right? I mean, like, so, like, there's, like, I could have... and still, though, would that have protected myself? It's an interesting thing to say when we talk about, like, using your voice, right? Like, use your voice and stand up and use your privilege. But, like, in that moment, it didn't actually feel safe to me to say anything. And then, you know what's funny is when I was getting off of the bus, I guess there was some people from our hotel on that bus, because when we were getting off our bus, they were there. And so in my head, I was like, should I go walk up and say something now? Like, now that I've had this bus ride, 20 minutes to ruminate on this a little bit. And I was like, no, still, like,
no, but it's understandable that it didn't feel safe for you.
Didn't feel safe,
and in those moments when you're very internal feeling insecure, that it wouldn't feel safe to go up to him and say something. Has the feeling that has it changed at all for you over time, like as you've gotten space from it, or like how are you?
So I went back, I told my partner immediately, and he was like so amazing about it. Went and had my therapist. I was like, I'm gonna come talk about this on the podcast. So it really is not a lie that vulnerability trumps shame, right? Like that is like that research. Brene knows what she's talking about.
Brene is a genius.
Which truly,
I said this the other day,
but having a safe place to talk about it, which I happen to have in my partner, in my therapist, and here with you.
And I think that's really key. And if you grew up in a family where it wasn't safe, right, where talking about your internal world wasn't safe, where maybe if you talked about it, you were shamed even more, or invalidated, then it's so easy to believe that the only person who can deal with that is you.
Yeah.
Right? And so the shame, but the tough thing about that is when we feel shame and we hold it in, the shame just builds. Right?
Yep.
And so to combat the shame, as Brene talks about, is to allow yourself to be vulnerable. You are so good at that. You are really good at allowing yourself to be vulnerable and talk about things. It takes...
I thank you for saying that.
You are.
I feel like that is a place that I still struggle.
That blows my mind.
Yes.
Because I think you're incredible at that. I very much struggle with that.
I will accept any compliment today.
As you should. I find that very challenging. It takes me days to say anything out loud if I'm feeling shame about it. And if I say it, I'm saying like only pieces of it.
Well, and for me, and I knew, and here's the thing I know that like, is that eating disorders grow and breed in the dark.
Right.
So my option was keep letting that eating disorder voice in my head tell me I can't eat the next day, or tell my partner, right? Like, and if I hadn't told them, I think that voice would have just kept growing, because that's how it breeds. You know,
and we were going to go into this episode and talk about like how certain parts are healed and other parts aren't healed, right? But even as you're talking about that, like, of course that's going to be hard and like painful and like hit a point that brings up a ton for you.
Yeah.
But your reaction to that was so healthy in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, I did, because I didn't use any type of symptoms or any type of really what I did was sit in distress. And that's like when we talk about distress tolerance skills, like to sit in distressing emotions and feel discomfort. That is truly what I did.
So do you feel, because like I
would like to get to the point where my response is just like, oh, fuck you, man. And like, that's it. And there's no like, right. Like for me to feel like I've truly like healed on that part, I would like to be there, which is really how I felt in like when the mom shaming part of it.
See, that in and of itself is impressive. I just think, I mean, listen, if anyone says anything to me, it's not,
you crumble.
I'm like, oh, you know, like, but I sit in it for a little bit and then I pull myself out of it. But like,
do you think that this is also part of thin privilege that you have, that here's the other part is like, I feel like in some ways I have had exposure therapy, because like I've been listening to comments about my body my entire life.
Well, I think if,
like, how often do you feel like your body is commented on?
Not that often.
Yeah. Right. So I think that there is part of that I got here because of years of having to get here, of having comments made about my body. Right. Comments like, you would be, God, your face is so gorgeous. That's my favorite one people like to give to fat girls. Your face is so beautiful. Oh my God, your face is like fuck you.
Right, like fuck you.
Right? Like, so I feel like it also comes from a lifetime of these comments that are just made when
and people it's just coming out of there's no awareness.
No, none.
And
they think they're giving you a compliment. They think they're being nice.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think like but it hits that part of you, right? Like if someone said to me something about being too sensitive.
Like, do people ever tell you like you seem so confident? Like,
no.
I get that comment all the time, right? So basically what they just mean is I dress myself in nice clothes even though I'm not skinny, right? Like, that's what that comment means.
Wow.
People tell me how confident I am all the time. I'm like, yeah, I know what you mean by that. Like, you like...
Wow.
Yes, right? Think about that. I get that all the time.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. So, like, part of it is, and that's what I mean, that, like, I don't, like, it doesn't feel fully healed because there's still the reaction and there's still the initial thought, and I would like to be, like, even more down. But to sit there, to have distress tolerance, to be able to use an inner monologue, to be able to share, right? Those are coping skills. When we think about coping skills, we are not just talking about, like, I'm trying to think of, like, doing a coloring book. Remember when coloring books were super big, like 5 years ago?
Yes, and like I never did it. Did you do it?
I
have no patience.
Somebody had given me a really funny cursing coloring book.
That was me.
Oh, while I was in labor?
Yes, that was me.
That was the only time I ever used it. Oh my God, no, yes.
Oh, I'm so happy.
I'm so sorry I didn't remember.
I thought they were just gag gifts.
I have been given so many coloring
I know.
books.
Listen, but I figured you'd appreciate that one.
You know, I love it.
Oh, I'm so... Did you do it while you were in labor?
Yes.
That's impressive.
Well, you need something to do.
Absolutely. I mean, besides giving birth.
Well, she wasn't coming out yet.
I don't know how that works.
Yeah.
Not sure what's happening there.
So I feel like when we talk about the idea of coping skills, people feel like it's supposed to be necessarily always deep breathing or like doing coloring books. Sometimes it is truly talking yourself down and being the stable voice that you need. Because we don't always have that in other people. And on that bus ride, the people that I happened to be with on that bus were, one, intoxicated, and two, I didn't feel safe.
I was just going to say they were all drunk.
Everyone was, yes.
Right, so that makes it hard. But I think a really good point that you're making is that healing in this, the journey of healing in this, isn't about not feeling this.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you felt this. Mm-hmm. You felt it intensely.
Yes, intensely.
But the healing that you have done in that process of being like, okay, how do I want to cope with this? Mm-hmm. I'm going to be vulnerable about this. I'm going to talk to my partner about it. Yeah. I'm going to, talk about how this affects me. I'm going to take it to therapy.
Yeah.
I am not going to have this like reactionary response. Mm-hmm. And that is so important. Like, you are in the process of healing.
But I'm also very careful about who I do share with, right? Like, when we talk about this idea of like telling our story and being vulnerable, I specifically made sure that I have a plus size therapist. Mm-hmm. My husband and I talk a ton about like all of this information, right? Like, you and I talk about it, Jen. Like, I wouldn't go, when we talk about sharing stuff with people can get really hurt telling to people that are not safe and do not understand.
That I'm so happy you said that, because I think that
talking to friends is like, it's so much more nuanced than that.
And I think it really is, like, we're therapists, so we can talk to each other, but like, we have the tools to be able to like respond to each other and know, whereas people still have their own biases, right? Like, your friends still have their own biases, and they're maybe very well intentioned, but there might be some people who don't feel safe in specific instances, right? Like, there might be times where you can go to certain friends and talk to them about other things.
Yeah.
But I think really carving that out, and it doesn't mean, oh, you're not close with them or they're not good people.
But I like the idea if you were to say like, okay, if I'm struggling in my romantic relationship, I talk to this person.
Right.
If I'm struggling in my body image, I talk to this person who's safe. If I'm struggling in financial stress, this person, right? Like, it doesn't have to be that it's one person for everything. Yeah. It doesn't have to be that every person fits into that category. But it's also taking time to set yourself up to be in relationships that do fulfill you and do heal you when you're hurting.
Yes. Because that can be re-traumatizing.
Yes.
Right?
I think about like, okay, if you're, this is a funny way to talk about it before we move on to Jen, right? But like, like sometimes like when you're drunk and you're smart and you're like, I'm going to get some water, I'm going to get some Advil, you set yourself up for success the next week, even when it's going to, the next day, even when it's going to hurt, I'm going to hurt a little less bad. That's what this is.
Oh, wow.
Right.
What a You're nurturing yourself when you're drunk.
And you must nurture yourself.
In all ways.
All right, dear Jen and Em.
All right, let me pull it up.
Give it to me.
And I think this might have absolutely nothing.
Well, that's okay. We're gonna find it.
Actually, no. There's a connection.
Okay.
Dear Em and Jen, question. When looking for a therapist to help process multiple abuse and traumas from a past relationship you had with a person with a high conflict personality that wasn't a dating or family relationship but was in a domestic setting, is it better to go to an LPC, LMHC who understands and has extensive knowledge of abuse and trauma yet might not have fully have a full understanding of relationships, or an LMFT who understands relationships yet only has a basic understanding of abuse and trauma.
Okay, what's your response to that?
So I think it's so easy to have a wide generalization about specific training that, yes, an LMFT, we're both LMFTs, has specific training around the systemic nature of relationships that maybe isn't present with an LPC or LMHC or anything else, licensed clinical social worker. But as a therapist, you can do even more training.
Yeah.
In
any subject.
And so everyone goes into, so like I do a ton with anxiety and depression. I work a lot with men, and
so
I do a lot of couples.
And how many additional trainings
Exactly.
have you done?
So you get pulled into really learning and understanding these topics. And so I would say it's not about the LPC, LMHC, LMFT. It's about the person. And the connection that you can make with your therapist who is really pulled towards certain topics.
Yes. And I think the other part that we can bring back to integration of self and parts of self is that, like, to think about yourself, like, which part of myself am I trying to heal? Am I trying to heal the relational part of myself, the trauma part of myself? Because it's true, an LMFT can have a ton of training in polyvagal theory to talk about trauma, right? Like, and LPC can have a bunch of training in family systems afterwards. So I think it's about who do I feel comfortable talking to? And also, it's not just about what happens in that room.
Right.
You can read books outside of that room and bring them into therapy, and also say to your therapist, hey, could we read this together? If any client came in and was like, I want to read this book and I never read it before, I would be like, okay, let's read it together.
Absolutely. It gives me an excuse to read a book.
Exactly.
I listen to a book.
Well, okay. So you rock a little audio book, you know?
But a quick audio book.
You are allowed to advocate for yourself in therapy by being a motivated client.
And I think what this person is asking is like where will I feel safest?
Yeah.
Right?
And that's not about credentials.
Because this is clearly an environment that you didn't feel safe in.
Yeah.
And it's understandable that you want to find someone that you feel really safe with.
And whenever a client comes in so concerned about their credentials or about the specialty or about the treatment plan, the thing I always remember is what this person is really feeling is, are you actually going to be able to help me? And it sounds like the fear is, how do I not put myself through more pain going through many therapists? And it's true, finding the right clinical team is an exhausting process. It is not easy.
No.
And so
been through like 8 different therapists.
So one of the things they're trying to do is think through beforehand.
Yes.
But someone could have literally the exact specialty you're looking for, and then you go into the office and you're like, I do not fucking like this person.
Right. And that is what's tough about it.
Yes.
Because it's not just about the training.
Yeah.
It's about emotionally feeling safe too. And that's something you determine.
Yes.
And might take time, especially when you have had relationships that were traumatic and were not safe for you.
But like anything, there's also a lot of stuff about what you do outside the room.
Right.
Right.
And that's exactly what we're talking about, is creating, right? Like as we were talking about, going to friends who you feel safe with certain topics, that you can cultivate that for yourself in certain relationships too.
Absolutely. I love it.
That's it. We did it.
See you next week.
Thanks for sticking with us.
If this episode related to yourself or anyone else you might know, feel free to send it along. You can rate, review, and subscribe and follow on Apple Podcasts. And we'll see you next week, because to grow yourself, you got to know yourself.